The sealed chamber experiment. In 1954, in a laboratory hidden beneath the streets of Moscow, a group of Soviet scientists conducted an experiment that remains anonymous to this day. Inspired by the horrors of sleep deprivation and the effects of extreme loneliness, this experiment was a desperate attempt to understand the limits of the human mind. 5 political prisoners were selected. They were promised freedom if they remained inside a sealed chamber for 30 days, without sleep, under the influence of an experimental gas. The walls were made of steel, with observation glass and microphones that transmitted every sound within the room. At first, the subjects chatted among themselves, told stories, and seemed to endure the test without problems. But soon paranoia began to take its toll. On the 3rd day, incoherent whispers replaced the conversations. On the 5th day, they began accusing each other of treason. On the 10th, absolute silence filled the room. The worried scientists checked the microphones, but all they heard were shallow breathing and strange murmurs. Was it the gas? Or something far worse? On the 15th, the researchers decided to intervene. They turned off the gas supply and announced over the loudspeakers that they would open the door. But something unimaginable happened. From inside, a hoarse, heart-rending voice whispered, "We don't want to go out." When they finally opened the chamber, what they found defied all logic. One of the subjects was dead, torn apart in a way that was impossible to explain. The other 4 were disfigured, their skin torn and their eyes sunken into black sockets. They had inflicted grotesque wounds on themselves, tearing at their flesh as if something inside them forced them to do so. The soldiers tried to subdue them, but the subjects displayed superhuman strength. They whispered under their breath, repeating the same phrase over and over. "We are the darkness. We are the truth." One of the terrified scientists asked the last survivor what they really were. With a smile that revealed blackened teeth, the subject replied, "You thought you were experimenting on us, but we were the ones who opened the door." Before he could say more, he was executed. The experiment was covered up, the records destroyed, and all trace of what happened was erased from history. But there are those who say that the scientists who participated in the project were never the same again. They woke up in the night, in a cold sweat, whispering phrases in a language that no one recognized. They say that the gas was never the real danger, that the sealed chamber should never have been opened, and that, in some forgotten corner of the world, those who opened the door are still waiting. The Midnight Passenger. In 1986, on a deserted New Mexico highway, trucker Tom Wilkins was driving his semi-truck in the dead of night. With the windshield fogged up and the radio playing static, he was trying to stay awake after more than 12 hours of travel. The road was an endless void of asphalt and shadows, and the only light was from his headlights. Halfway there, he saw a figure standing on the side of the road. It was a man dressed in a long coat and a wide-brimmed hat, his gaze hidden in the darkness. Something about his posture seemed odd. Still, Tom slowed down and stopped a few feet ahead. The man got in without saying a word. He sat in the passenger seat, and for the first few minutes, it was completely silent. Only the engine and the wind were present. Tom, uncomfortable, tried to start a conversation. "Where are you going?" The passenger slowly turned his head toward him. His voice was deep and hushed. "Go ahead." Tom felt a chill run down his spine, but he decided to ignore it. The road continued on, and every time he tried to start another conversation, the man responded with short, emotionless sentences. Around an hour into the drive, Tom noticed something terrifying. Although the passenger was next to him, his reflection was not in the windshield. He tried to glance at him, but with each attempt his face seemed to distort, as if his form was out of reality. His heart racing, he pretended to search for something in his glove compartment and slipped a pocket knife into his hand. He had to stop. He had to do something before it was too late. Suddenly, the passenger spoke in a deeper tone. "You know you can't stop, Tom?" The trucker felt absolute panic. He had never told him his name. He slammed on the brakes as hard as he could, the truck slid with a rumble, and when it finally came to a stop, he looked toward the passenger's seat. It was empty. Shivering, Tom climbed out of the truck and scanned the road. There was no one there. No footprints, no signs that anyone had been there. Just the cold of the early morning and the sound of the wind whistling through nothingness. Tom never picked up anyone on the road again after that night. But every time he drove alone on the highway, he saw the same figure in his rearview mirror. Waiting. Watching. Smiling. The call from the morgue. I always thought urban legends were just that, exaggerated tales to scare the gullible. But after that night, I know that some stories hide some truth, and I wish I had never found out. This story was told to me by my uncle, who worked as a security guard at a morgue in the city. He was a skeptical man, someone who never believed in the supernatural. Until something happened to him that changed his way of seeing the world forever. The first call. It was a winter morning, the quietest shift of the month. He was supposed to just check the security cameras and make sure everything was in order. But at 2:33 a.m., the office phone rang. It wasn't common for someone to call at that hour. When he picked up, he heard only static and labored breathing. "Hello?" he asked. Silence. And then a whispering voice, almost inaudible, said something that made his skin crawl. "Don't leave me alone here." My uncle hung up immediately, thinking it was a practical joke. But something unsettled him. He checked the cameras, but everything seemed normal. The call had to be from some prankster, right? The second call. At 3 a.m. the phone rang again. This time the voice was clearer. It was a woman's, speaking desperately. "Please, don't leave me here. It's cold." The line was abruptly cut off. My uncle felt a chill run down his spine. He decided to trace the call with the internal system. What he discovered chilled him. The call came from an internal extension. More precisely from the corpse room. With a flashlight in hand he went to the place. He cautiously opened the door and looked around. Nothing out of the ordinary, until he noticed something strange. One of the bodies, a young woman who had been admitted that same afternoon after a traffic accident, had her mouth slightly open. Her record said she had died instantly, and yet her expression seemed one of absolute terror. The final message. Convinced that someone was playing with him, my uncle returned to the office and checked the phone records. Something didn't add up. The number from which the calls came did not exist. And then a beep came on the phone. It was a voice message. When he played it back, he almost dropped the receiver. It was the same voice, but this time whispering in agony. "I'm still here, awake." My uncle quit his job that same week. And since then he never spoke of it again. He only confessed it to me one night, drunk and with tears in his eyes. I'd like to say that it was all a joke. But recently I found an old newspaper in my grandmother's house. On the front page 20 years ago, there was a terrifying news story. Young woman wakes up in the morgue after being declared dead. She dies of hypothermia after not receiving help in time. The photo showed a woman, the same one who, according to my uncle, begged him for help in the call. Tell me, after hearing this, do you still believe that the dead cannot speak? Room 616. There are hotels that hide dark secrets. Places where time seems to have stopped, where the hallways are never completely empty, and where some doors should remain closed forever. That was what Raul discovered when he accepted a job as a night receptionist at the Hotel San Miguel, an old building in the city center. It wasn't long before he heard rumors about room 616. It was said that no one who spent a night there slept peacefully, or that some simply didn't wake up. The first warning. The first few nights passed without incident. But one Monday at 2:16 a.m., the reception phone rang. "Reception, how can I help you?" Raul asked. Silence. "Hello?" he insisted. Then he heard heavy, distorted breathing, followed by a whisper. "Don't open the door." Raul felt a chill. He looked at the phone screen and his heart stopped for a second. The call was from room 616. The problem was that that room was empty. The encounter. Armed with a flashlight and the excuse that it might be a problem with the phone line, Raul went up to the 6th floor. The hallway was dim, the air thick. When he reached the door to room 616, he felt a dull thud from inside. He knocked softly. Nothing. He turned the handle. The door was open. The smell of dampness and something else, maybe mold or something rotten, made him cover his nose. The room was empty, but the bathroom mirror was fogged up, as if someone had taken a shower minutes before. And then he saw it. A message scrawled in the steam. "He saw you." Raul felt a paralyzing cold on his back. A noise to his right made him turn his head. In the reflection of the mirror, a tall, thin figure watched him from the darkest corner of the room. But when he turned around, there was no one there. Fear turned to panic. He ran out and went down to the reception desk without looking back. The last guest. The next morning he decided to check the hotel's archives. He discovered something disturbing. Exactly 20 years ago, a guest had committed suicide in room 616. They found him sitting on the bed, staring into the mirror. In the note he left, he wrote only one sentence. "Don't open the door." That same night, Raul resigned and never set foot in the Hotel San Miguel again. But there is something that continues to torment him to this day. When he packed his suitcase, he found something in the pocket of his uniform. An old, rusty key with the number 616 engraved on it. He threw her away, but sometimes when he wakes up in the middle of the night, he swears he hears a telephone ringing, and a distorted voice whispering his name.